So what'd you want to ask her?
How's it feel to kill someone?
You tell me.
Welcome back to our final video covering Basic Instinct. If you haven't seen the first episode, we suggest you do that. Otherwise, let's continue. Right at the start of the movie, Johnny Boz's killer is visually plain and simple. In this scene, Sharon Stone is the woman on the bed. And we know this because Stone herself said she almost passed out while filming the opening scene. I began to panic. I thought that the retractable fake ice pick had failed to retract and that I had in fact killed him. The fury of the sequence, coupled with the director screaming, "Hit him harder! Harder, and more blood, as the guy under the bed pumped more fake blood through the prosthetic chest, had already made me weak. To also be fair, Tramell says in Basic Instinct 2,
I killed Johnny Boz.
Why?
I didn't like him.
The question is, was she using the words to manipulate Dr. Glass, or was she telling the truth? As we often say, that's something you will have to decide based on the way you see things. Now, there are theories out there that say Beth killed Boz, and that the image we see in the opening scene is Beth's imagination, that she is Catherine Tramell. We will cover this theory later after we go through the introductory scenes with Beth. Okay, I'm going to be frank. Boz's sheets is the most disgusting thing I've seen in film. Forget graphic horror films or shock schlock. I need a hazmat suit just looking at it. I mean, how many months has it been since these have been washed? Or is this guy just a machine gun? And don't forget he has a maid. What kind of maid?
Mr. Darth, you no have no more Windex on Star Destroyer.
Well, that's not my problem. Why don't you go out and buy some?
No, you buy.
Alright, I'm quickly moving along. Now, a quick, short, funny moment in the film is when Gus inspects the Picasso at Boz's house. Then when they get to Tramell's house in the heights of San Francisco, there is a Picasso on the wall, and Gus comments,
"Ain't that cute? They got his and hers Picassos."
Gus, I didn't even know you knew who Picasso was.
Sure I do. It says right here.
Hers is bigger.
This joke would have actually continued. In the novel, when they arrive at Catherine Tramell's house, there's two lotuses there, and Gus would say, after his and her Picassos, his and her lotuses are the logical next step. Anything with Gus should be kept in the film. Love this character. Roxy is clearly a devotee of Catherine, as she will not offer any information unless specifically asked for it. This is a great shot and introduction to Tramell. She is a woman who has everything: money, houses, cars, health, beauty, and yet this shot shows her sitting throne-like above jagged, lifeless rocks. It is a harsh image and a true reflection to this character. When initially grilled, Tramell is not shy at pointing out that she knows exactly who Nick Curran is. Though we can assume Roxy called and warned her they were coming, one must take into account that Tramell has been studying this man for at least 3 months, as that is when Nielsen sold her Nick's file. She has been studying him for her new book, which she would obviously be working on already. It's not like she started writing this book after this initial meeting, as the movie takes place only for a short time. Now, I can't stress enough how well the actors are directed by Verhoeven in this film. Every performance is fluidly matched to its intelligent dialogue by Esterhazy's script. The initial meeting scene is a perfect example of this. Notice how Tramell seems to dismiss and stonewall Gus.
So how did he die?
He was murdered.
Obviously.
While she politely focuses on Nick.
Was there anyone with you last night?
No. I wasn't in the mood last night.
Making it clear he is the only one she is interested in talking to. The expressions and timing of these three performers is perfection, and this is a constant throughout the film. Catherine takes seriously only who she chooses when she chooses. Later, Catherine will play nice to Gus, for reasons we can assume is to placate Nick. When threatened to go downtown by Gus, Catherine quickly shows her control when she calls him on his bluff. Knowing her power to get out of the situation with lawyers and connections, Throughout the entire film, Catherine is always maintaining her control over others who are clearly not up to her level, which seems extremely high, almost omnipotent, which goes with the first theory the makers of the film put forward in interviews. In the novel, it states that Beth has been at her job in the department for 2 years. An important thing to mention is that Beth is shown to be unethical right from the start, as she had a relationship with a patient while she was working with him. This is a serious breach of ethics in her profession. What is even more curious is that many know about her dalliance with Nick, as it is known by Nilsson from Internal Affairs months ago. Nick's lieutenant even comments,
Sometimes I think he started banging her just to get off the hook with Internal Affairs.
Oh, he ain't that way. He's got a heart.
Now, Nick is in this office because he shot 2 tourists who were fishing in the San Francisco Bay accidentally. He was undercover during a drug buy that went sour, and the bystanders were hit by 9mm automatic rounds. These details are from the novel, and the newspapers shown later in the film confirmed this. Now, since Nick is an addict, whether drugs, drink, or his job, he has blatant addiction issues, and his temper does not help the situation. However, Beth clears him to no longer return for counseling at his request, and states she will get with IA about it. This is not necessarily a breach of etiquette, because Beth could genuinely believe that he is okay, and the novel backs this up.
Boy, when that girl mates, it's for life.
This line is perfectly placed in the film, as it starts to put the idea into the viewer's head that Beth hangs on to folks forever. This is a foreshadow for revelations about her relationship and obsession with Catherine Tramell and possibly Nick. When Beth and Dr. Lamont go over the case, take a look at Beth's glance at Nick when he says,
So what if it's not the writer? What if it's someone who read the book?
I can't help but feel this is the movie trying to tell us something. Now, there is a setup here to condition us to see that Nick has an understanding of Tramell on some level. This is because he is a lot like her, as we will see throughout the film. When Talcott says Nick is crazy, Gus says this.
You know what to say. Takes one to know one.
We will go into this concept as we get deeper in the film. It is not accidental these clippings are waiting to be seen by Nick. She knew without or with omnipotence, however you prefer, that sooner or later they would come to take her in for questioning, and when they would come, these papers would be waiting for Nick. Nick reveals his lack of decorum and how easy he can be corrupted as he watches her get undressed. The mirrors also allow for her to be seen rooms away, and this was no doubt the first of many blatant temptations that Catherine will throw at Nick. When they leave her house, Catherine is in the front leading the cops, rather than them ushering her, thus showing her control. Catherine continues to try to corrupt Nick as they're in the car with cigarettes. The driving scene and the interrogation scene is just another great example of a solid script. There are so many quotable and memorable moments in this film. When Tramell walks into the interrogation room, she shows zero sign of pause or discomfort. She is exactly where she expected, and she will manipulate the men in the room by making them uncomfortable. Thus we come to the uncrossing of her legs. Part of this is to control the men, but another reason that she does this is because she means exactly what she says. She has nothing to hide. She will bear it all without fear, and they can do nothing to stop her. When Nick drives Catherine home, she flaunts what she said earlier about lying. She states beating a lie detector would be easy, and then infers that Nick did the same, thus making them innocent, so they have something in common. Now, how would she know if he lied on a lie detector? As such a thing is unprovable. I see this as further mind games, but proponents of the demonic theory can cite this scene as another example of omnipotence. When Nick takes a drink again, we know he is in for a downfall, and another cop who knows this is Marty Nilsson from Internal Affairs. Nilsson is a slimeball, but he is right about Nick. Nick should not be a cop. He is dangerous, filled with bad judgments, and he has killed innocents before, and quite possibly he could do so again, which all this could be a foreshadow to Beth's death, depending on who you believe killed who at the end of this movie. For years, I was always confused about the sex scene with Beth, and I thought it was out of taste for the film. But when we start looking at Beth and Nick's psychology, what happened here is quite revealing about them both. You visually see that Nick is bubbling with aggravation when he walks in her apartment. He represses his nature all the time, and whenever Nick gets angry, he lashes out. So Nick did exactly what he always does. He releases his rage, whether it hurts another or not. Beth does try to resist. However, Nick is exactly what he shows in this scene. He uses her for his outlet, and at the end, Beth tries to quantify what happened by questioning him because she actually feels that they have a relationship. And honestly, she is deluding herself, and he is callous to her concerns.
You tell me, you're the shrink.
This begins to show that Beth has her own issues. I would think that most people in Beth's situation would either report Nick or at least tell Nick to stay away after being so violent. But Beth acts like a battered housewife. She tells him to leave, and then she quickly forgives him the next day. So the question here is, does Beth have a complex to accept this abuse? And is this the way she was with Catherine, who we know is abusive like Nick? What would that do to her own psychology? The inclusion of the character Hazel Dobkins in this movie is merely window dressing. The where and why of what she did is basically there to say she is also a killer and happens to be in the orbit of Tramell. Roxy is also a noted killer, and both of them have a commonality. When they killed, they snapped and then murdered innocent kids as if they were possessed, and have no understanding of their events by all accounts given in the film.
One day, out of the clear blue sky, she doesn't. Said she didn't know why she'd done it.
What was the motive?
She said she didn't know herself, just sort of did it on impulse. The razor just happened to be there. That's what she said.
Now, Catherine will later say that she is around these types for research, but like Nick, she loves fire. So much so that she starts having a physical relationship with Roxy, who was once deemed criminally insane by the state. This exactly mirrors Nick, who is actively too close to the fire, like Catherine, and begins having an affair with a prime murder suspect. When Nick learns that Catherine knows way too much about him, especially when she starts questioning him about his late wife, he reacts with his temper rather than logically. He goes after Beth, and she is oddly shocked by his approach. She tries to explain herself rather than getting help. Thus, it shows again how she accepts his abuse rather than dealing with it. Nick continues his unhinged tirade and goes after Nilsson, and after assaulting an internal affairs officer, Nick is basically throwing his career out the window. Yet Nick doesn't even think about this, showing how unhinged he really is. By now, it is evident that Nick is not a good person in judgment or morality. He is not someone to root for. So what does Nick do? Exactly what you would expect. The wrong thing. He goes home and starts drinking. At this point, Beth should be voicing concerns to the department about Nick's mental stability. However, Beth does the exact opposite. Instead, she goes to him lovingly, trying to cling to what she thinks they have, and tries to make him understand her actions, and that she did what she did to help him. Now, this conversation is important because Nick does to Beth exactly what Catherine will do to Nick later. First, he diminishes their sexual interactions by saying,
"We went to bed, 10, 15 times maybe? It wasn't memorable enough to carry an obligation."
Did you really think it was so special?
Then he dismisses her without consideration, cutting her off from him as if she means nothing.
Put her on the goddamn table and leave!
Just like Catherine later does to him.
Goodbye. What do you want, flowers? I'll send you an autographed copy.
Now, Hellraiser was put on the screen on purpose, according to Verhoeven. Firstly, it represents a dream of hell that Nick is falling into and a foreshadow of the hell he is entering. Second, it goes back to the first theory, that Catherine is an embodiment of evil and demonic, and the film is trying to remind us of these things. Now, the question to who killed Nilsson is answered immediately by Verhoeven in his commentary.
So now, basically, she has achieved her goal, isn't it? She killed Nilsson, clearly. I mean, not because she had a problem with Nilsson. The only way the reason she killed him was her diabolical plan to make him suspicious or even look guilty.
To most folks, like myself, Beth seemed the most likely suspect. First, he is shot in the head in his car with a .38, which just so happens to be the same caliber and way Beth's husband was killed in a drive-by. Beth also has motives to retaliate on Nilsson for not only exposing the fact that she broke confidentiality, which could ruin her career, but is actively destroying Nick, who she seems to be blindly in love with. In the interrogation room, Nick is imaged more and more like Catherine by saying,
What are you gonna do, charge me with smoking?
Then, the subject of alibi comes up.
Going after him before gets you off the hook for killing him. That's your alibi.
Like writing a book about killing a guy gets you off the hook for killing him.
Good point.
One thing that was in the novel that should have been in the movie was when Nick stated he went after Nilsson because he was showing his file outside the department. When asked what proof he had, Nick backpedaled, because if he revealed that Beth gave his file to Nilsson, she would be in deep trouble and most likely lose her license. At this point in the movie, I felt sorry for Beth. Nick hasn't shown he's been good to her at all. In my eyes, he raped her, regardless if they were intimate before. His words have been cruel, and he gave nothing in return to her at all so far. In this scene, Beth shows up and saves him. She always goes out of her way for Nick and is crapped on. I've always been frustrated that Triplehorn didn't have a better career because her performance of this character was engaging for her first role, and to think she would go on in the next few years to do The Firm and Waterworld, which are both great films, and I will cover Waterworld for sure one day. Yet she never became a big star. Of course, Stone steals the show, but I think Triplehorn's performance is the second best acting performance in this film. Once again, Beth lovingly seems to forgive Nick. However, take a look at her facial expression when he leaves. Catherine is obviously toying with Nick by seducing him through his vices. In this scene, she encourages him to drink Jack Daniels while she barely touches her drink. She then goes further by using psychology on Nick by calling him Shooter, thus drumming up his emotions about the incident in the past. When he asks her to stop calling him that, she picks something more painful by calling him Nicky. To end this scene, there's another parallel that likens Nick to Catherine, this time using Nick's own words.
Everybody she plays with dies. I know what that's like.
When Nick goes to the club, he approaches her stall, ready to go all in on her temptations, and Catherine knows this, yet to toy with him, she shuts the door in his face. However, we all know how this night ends, and of course I can't show it on YouTube, so let's move on. When Roxy tries to kill Nick, is she suffering the same affliction as Beth might have if she indeed killed Nilsson? Verhoeven and de Bont suggested that Catherine might have put Roxy up to kill Nick.
It's quite possible that she suggested it, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. If you hate him so much, why don't you? I mean,
yeah, why don't you try something? Yeah, that's what she would have said.
In the end, Nick has no problem lying on an official police document about what happened with Roxy, thus putting his morality more into question. The scene with Nick, Beth, and the shrinks is just perfect dialogue. Nick's hostility is fully exposed, and his responses to the questions about his youth are just quotable gold. The thing about this is that when Nick walks out of this office, acting the way he does, his career is just over. He is currently suspended and suspected of foul play with both Nilsson and Roxy, and blowing this evaluation off would end it all. From this moment on, Nick is pretty much not a cop due to his brazen attitude, and at the end of the film, When the police think Beth did it and set him up, Nick is free and clear, which is not beyond suspension of disbelief. He is even congratulated. The only part in the movie that suggests that Catherine has real feelings for another person is this scene. This scene is often cited as proof that Catherine is guarded because of the tragedy with her parents, Manny and Roxy. However, it's also just as possible she is doing this to rope in Nick further to manipulate him. Now, a deleted scene that was definitely filmed was on the beach beneath Catherine's house the next morning. Nick asks her about Nilsson and the file, and Catherine confesses that she paid him $50,000 for it after she saw articles about his shootings in the paper. She claimed she would have paid more, and she just wanted to learn about Nick. She then mentions that she is losing interest in her book and kisses him, suggesting that he is more important to her. Then the phone rings. Catherine states it is Gus, who doesn't like me, and Gus asks if Nick has an ice pick in him yet, to which Catherine thinks it's funny. This would have been a great scene for the film, but alas, these pictures were all that I could find of it. When Beth returns home, Nick is waiting after all of the revelations at Berkeley. Nick, who is not the best judge of people or situations, must now decide who is the victim and who is the murderer between the two women. Beth is very open and seemingly honest in her answers, but I don't think she wins him over. She tries to warn him about Catherine being evil, but it falls on deaf ears as Nick returns to Catherine shortly. Ironically, Catherine discards Nick just like he discarded Beth. Nick throws an expected temper tantrum, but Catherine is not intimidated by him. The coldness of Catherine doesn't fit proposed theories that Catherine is a victim to constant tragedies. Throughout the entire film, she has been this way. No matter how you view this film, one thing you need to take account is that Catherine's computer is specifically describing how Gus dies at the end of the film. Again, this goes to either Catherine did it or she's omnipotent. On the way to Oakland to meet Tramell's mystery roommate, Gus gives this insight.
Johnny Boz's psychiatrist has an office on Van Ness. Guess who he shares office space with? Dr. Elizabeth Garner.
During this revelation, Nick just doesn't care as he is thinking about the rejection by Catherine rather than solving the murders. This shows how vile and selfish Nick really is. This was also mentioned in the book. The last words Beth says are, "I loved you." And it is sad if she meant it, as Nick had little love for her. The film wraps up the investigation quick. Many cite that the police officers are stupid by finding a coat and saying, "Oh, it's the same size, so it must be the killer." But for time's sake, the cuts are quick, as the film talks about the hidden 38 in Beth's apartment, as well as the pictures and books, which all could have been planted. There is also the clip where Harrigan said,
"And Johnny Boz's psychiatrist says he thinks he remembers Dr. Garner and Boz meeting at a Christmas party at his house a year ago."
Now earlier, Beth said this.
God, I mean, do you really think that I could kill someone? I mean, I never even met Johnny Boz.
Beth could be saying the truth because we all meet people a year ago, and do you really remember them all? And this meeting is based off third-hand testimony that is not concrete. Basically, everything concluding the film is a bit suspicious and staged. I agree that the investigation wrap-up needed to be tighter and required work, but I can see why the editing rushed this along, because I think the creators wanted to retain the ambiguity rather than confirm all guilt on Beth. I think this is one of the reasons the film is timeless, because people always debate whether it's Beth or Catherine. I think they made the right choice by keeping it ambiguous. In the end, Nick is congratulated for the case and he is expressionless. Does he question if Beth was set up? If he did, it says a lot about his character not saying anything. Nick is deserving to what is coming to him, because at the end of the film, with his match made in hell, is an ice pick. So now we come to the two prevalent theories. The first is that Beth did it all. Beth has some serious abuse issues that could explain this theory's premise. There is also good grounds to suspect her not only because of the alleged Tramell stalking, but because when her husband died, the police officer stated she had a girlfriend.
What, he had a girlfriend?
No. She did.
If this scenario was true, then Beth would be caught in a serious lie in this film.
I was embarrassed. It was the only time I've been with a woman.
And brings up further psychological issues that can explain things. So here is the theory in a nutshell. To buy this theory, there are two things that must be believed. One, Beth is a lesbian who is ashamed of her lifestyle and tries to be heterosexual to no avail. Two, she is obsessive with others she has relations with. So let's break this theory down. Beth met Catherine in college and was obsessed with her. Catherine put out a restraining order, and for some reason, Beth killed Professor Goldstein, who Catherine knew. Beth gets married and on the side has a girlfriend. Beth kills her husband with a .38 for reasons undisclosed. Then Beth goes to San Francisco, where Catherine happens to live, and continues her obsession at a distance while working at the San Francisco Police Department. Once again, Beth has a lapse in judgment and has an affair with one of her patients, Nick. It doesn't pan out, but she is insistent in caring for him desperately. It could be suggested that she is trying to convince herself that she is heterosexual, thus trying to bury her lesbian desires unhealthily. Beth then meets Johnny Boz after being introduced to him and knows he is seeing Catherine. Beth then meets up with Johnny and seduces him. In the first scene of the film, Beth imagines she is Catherine, and so the first scene of the movie is Beth's point of view, not reality. Then she kills Boz. When Nielsen is exposed by Nick, Beth kills Nielsen to not only protect herself, but the man she is currently obsessed with. Beth tries to convince Nick of her devotion throughout the movie, but by the end, the walls are closing in. She discovers Gus is learning about her, and in an effort to contain the situation, she sets him up and kills him. Then Nick finds the body and shoots Beth, who says she loves him before she dies. It's a very interesting theory that Beth did all this because psychologically it makes Beth a very complex character instead of that girl who just wants her man to know she is supportive of him. It brings into the performance that Beth is trying desperately to convince herself that she is one thing while she is actually another, and it makes her a very disturbed individual. Now, I'll be honest, I've always had a problem with this theory because it makes Catherine a complete victim in the film. She kills no one. You could argue she killed her parents, but if it was an accident, as suggested, then that means Catherine's parents were killed, then a wacko got obsessed with her in college, and has been following her around killing people she knew in an attempt to either become her or get revenge on her for rejection reasons. You could argue that this makes sense because this makes Catherine guarded and very overconfident in her presentation to mask her vulnerabilities, which we see lowered after Roxy died. Proponents of this theory suggest that at the end of the movie, when the ice pick is shown, Catherine is considering killing Nick because she went over the edge after all these events. But she doesn't kill Nick because she actually feels like she loves him. The problem with the Beth theory is that Sharon Stone calls Catherine a sociopathic killer in almost all her interviews. And we won't even mention Douglas or Verhoeven's takes. If Catherine is a sociopathic killer, who has she killed? Especially in this movie. Her parents? Maybe. It totally ignores what the creators of the film are on record saying. Then there is the Catherine theory. This theory states basically Catherine did it all. She killed her parents, used Beth in college, got Nick's file, saw Beth's name on the reports, researched her, then killed Boz to begin the events of the film. She then framed Beth with using Nick to do it, and manipulated him to destroy all ties to her past. And at the end of the film, the members of GLAAD and Queer Nation were completely right in that Catherine did it. The ice pick sums it all up at the end for this theory. Now, beyond the demonic theory, the Beth theory, and the Catherine theory, there are other theories out there. Some of them suggest that both Catherine and Beth were killing people. And this can be explained away in very interesting ways. The beauty of this film is that you can watch the film with one of these theories in mind, and the film not only transforms into a different viewing experience and can be quantifiable based on things in the film or referenced by the filmmakers themselves. The film is constructed perfectly so that the ambiguity allows you to see what you want to see. I know of very few films in the world where you can see 3 different films in one movie. Basic Instinct really did a good job achieving this kind of thing, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's timeless. Finally, we have to address Basic Instinct 2. I know the film is not loved, and anyone has the right to say there is no Basic Instinct 2, because we all view films the way we choose. However, because we want thoroughness on this channel, we have to bring it up. If Basic Instinct 2 is taken into account, the demonic theory is basically thrown out the window, as Catherine is humanized in the second movie. The Beth theory could work in that she killed everyone and then Catherine morphs into a homicidal maniac because of it, and continues the tradition in Basic Instinct 2. Basic Instinct is a great Hitchcockian mystery, and that is why we won't tell you what theory we support the most. Today, Basic Instinct could not be made, just like Blazing Saddles, A Clockwork Orange, and I would argue Austin Powers or Revenge of the Nerds, as well as countless other films. It was great that Verhoeven stood up for his script in 1992 because that is what we need today in Hollywood. Sensitivity writing rules cinemas today, and considering what happened with this movie, it could have arrived sooner. What happened in 1992 was a watershed moment for the industry. A group tried to change a film believing it maligned them, and their attempts failed. In fact, it helped make the movie even more known and successful. Fast forward 30 plus years later, and a group, which one doesn't matter, infiltrated Hollywood, but instead of failing, it was successful. During the past several years, we have been force-fed bland films with contrived characters lacking real depth beyond a standard identity. These bland characters don't honor any community. In fact, it degrades them as it diminishes the complexity every single one of us have, no matter where we come from or what we believe. Modern films tell us certain people are stereotypes or possess tropes that does not represent people truly. Such characters deserve better than that. What is truly despicable is that moviegoers who criticize such things are now subject to the media labeling them bigot, racist, toxic, or many other disgusting things. It's a shame we went down that route, and I think if people who understood Basic Instinct's history and example, we would have better movies today, and creatives would stand up for their projects rather than roll over and give into a story policing mob. With that said, it's time to end another video. Next up is the behind the scenes of Return of the Jedi, followed by the analysis of that film. We hope you liked this video, and who knows, maybe someday we will get beyond the bland filmmaking of the modern era, and there will be more films to rival the one we just covered in this video.
You got goddamn Tweety birds fluttering around your head. That's what you got.
I'm being serious.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Help the channel.